Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah here. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelek Aleph, and we will be learning today Mitzvah Hashem Daf Samach Hey Amud Beis. We are continuing to learn Hilchas Tefillin, and we pick up today on Samach Hey Amud Aleph, second to the last line in the Shulchan Aruch, Siman Lamed Zayin Sif Gimel. Says the Mechaber, Katan Hayodea Lishmar Tefillin B'Tahara. A katan, a minor child, somebody who's not yet the age of 13, who knows how to properly, lishmar means to guard, but it means to protect the kedusha of the tefillin, to treat the tefillin the way they're supposed to be treated. Katan yedea lishmar tefillin b'tahara. He knows, he's cognizant of the need and of the halachas, and he's able to protect the kedusha of the tefillin properly when he wears them. What does this mean, says the Mechaber? Shelo yishan, he shouldn't fall asleep while wearing the tefillin. V'lo yafiach behem, he should not pass gas while he's wearing the tefillin. Haga, and now the Ramah adds another requirement. V'shelo likanis behem lebeis hakisei. It's to be a child that's old enough to understand the kedusha of the tefillin and to understand that he cannot go into the beis hakisei while wearing tefillin. Such a child, says the Mechaber, Chayiv Aviv Liknais Lei Tefillin Lechanchai. His father is required to purchase tefillin for him in order to be mechanech him properly in the mitzvah of tefillin. Says the Mishnah Berurah on the bottom of Samach Hey Amud Aleph, Ois Kanches Hayodeya. We're talking about this katan that knows how to protect the kedusha of the tefillin properly. Says the Chavetz Chaim, the kaidem lochein ein rashoy lo yach tefillin. Before he reaches that age and that ability, he's not allowed to put on tefillin because he can't take care of them properly. Velav chinuchu. And in that case, to purchase tefillin for this child, that would not be a fulfillment of the requirement of chinuch. You're not being mechanechim. If he can't do it right, you're not being mechanechim. So when do you have a chiyuv to purchase tefillin for him to be mechanechim? When he's able to fulfill the requirements of the mitzvah. Ois katan tes lechanchai. You have to purchase tefillin for him to be mechanechim. B'mitzvahs hanachosan. You have to be mechanechim in the mitzvah of putting on tefillin. V'chein lelamdai hadinim hanutzrachim lazeh. And you also have to teach him the dinim that are required, the halachas that he has to know in order for him to be mekayim the mitzvah properly. It's interesting, there's a bir halacha over here, Dibra Mascha Liknoislai. Says the Chavetz Chaim, ve'yesh la'ayin is room to look into, im yesh lo shnei banim. If somebody has two sons, im chayev liknois tefillin avor kol echad, is he chayiv to purchase a pair of tefillin for each one of them? Or maybe he could buy one pair of tefillin for the children and first be mechanech one child with using those tefillin. And after that boy finishes davening, yitreim livnei hasheni, give it to the second one. Similarly, if somebody has one son, and he has the ability to borrow a pair of tefillin for him, or the father could give the child his own tefillin, in order to recite Kriya Shema while wearing tefillin and for Shemona Esrei, in other words, for the time period when he's a katan at least, why do I have to go ahead and buy him a pair of tefillin? I'll be mechanechim using my tefillin. Im yoytze bezeh. Are you yoytze your chiyuv of chinuch? The efsher ma de nakat habraisa aviv kaina loy tefillin. You see, this is all based on a brisa that's brought down in Sukkah daf mem beis amud aleph. And over there the brisa says a child of that age aviv kaina loy tefillin. The father has to purchase tefillin for him. Haynu dafka bizmanam shayu menichim tefillin kalayim. You see, right away you might be asking yourself, why does the Mechaber say that the father has a chiyuv to purchase tefillin for the son? Why do I have to purchase a separate set of tefillin? I'll daven by the 7 o'clock minyan, and my son will daven by the 8 o'clock minyan. So I'll wear my tefillin by the 7 o'clock minyan, and I'll be mechanech my son by the 8 o'clock minyan. He'll put on tefillin by the 8 o'clock minyan. The answer is because you have to realize, like the Chavetz Chaim says here, Hainu dafka bizman nomisha yumenichin tefillin kol hayoim. Let's remember, right? Like we said, did we say this yesterday? We said yesterday in Sif Beis, mitzvasan lihiyoisam alav kol hayoim. The ikar mitzvah of tefillin is really is supposed to be wearing tefillin all day. So therefore, when the Brisa in Sukkah, which I'm looking up right now, the Brisa in Sukkah, Mem Beis Amud Aleph, Tana Rabbanan, Katan Hayedei L'Naneya, a katan who is able to understand the halachas and the how he has to take the daled minim, Chayiv Beluliv, Lehisateif, if he knows how to put on tzitzits, Chayiv B'tzitzits, Lishmar Tefillin, if he knows how to protect his tefillin b'tahara, Aviv Loikeach Lo Tefillin. His father has to purchase tefillin for him. That's the Brisa. There's no Rashi over here on that line. But again, why exactly does he have to buy tefillin? The answer is because in order to be Mekayim the mitzvah of tefillin properly, that really required to wear the tefillin all day. And that's why you have to buy a separate pair of tefillin. Now what the Biur Halacha is saying is, wait a second. Nowadays, even forget if you have two sons, do you have to buy for each one? Even if you have one son, why do you have to run to buy him a pair of tefillin? You'll give him a pair of tefillin for Kriya Shema and tefillin. You'll daven at separate minyanim. Haydu dafka bizman nomisha yemnichin tefillin kol hayoim vein motzei shiyash alecha b'chaverei tefilov mashe ain't kain bizmanenu. But nowadays, what's the problem? You don't need tefillin all day. Teda deloy nakat kain belulav. The Brisa in Sukkah that I just read, it doesn't say that the father is chayiv to buy daled minim for the son, because why should he be chayiv to buy? I'll give him my set of daled minim to use. Shuv matzasi b'bach, the Chavetz Chaim says, I then found in the bach, shamash b'k'tzas kidvarenu. V'yesh litchais ayin sham v'tzarachiyun. He says, take a look at the bach, where this is discussed in greater detail. But in any case, the Mechaber said over here that you're chayav liknois loy tefillin. Okay, now we go to the Ramah on the top line here on Samach Amud Beis. Says the Ramah, v'yesh oimrim dahai katan. There are those that say that this katan that we're referring to over here, that you're chayav to be mechanechim in the mitzvah of tefillin, dafku shuhu ben shloisha asar shana v'yem echad. We're not really talking about a katan. We're talking about somebody who's already attained the age of 13 years and a day. V'chein noagu v'ein l'shanos. And interesting, the Ramah says, V'chein noagu v'ein l'shanos. He says that's the minig nowadays, and we shouldn't change it. But let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cotton yud, dafka. The Ramah says that there are those that say dafka, somebody who's 13 years in a day. The kainam l'chein ein manichai lil b'yish tefillin afilu im yirtzeh. And there are those that say that somebody who's younger than 13 years in a day, you don't let him put on tefillin, even if he wants to. The bevadai ein yodea lishmar tefillin, because a child of that age certainly is not capable of wearing his tefillin b'tahara. Now we have to understand that wearing tefillin b'tahara is not only a question of protecting against the bodily needs, that you shouldn't pass gas while you're wearing the tefillin. There's also the idea that you can't be masiach das from the tefillin. This is something that gets short shrift, Rabbi say. People have to remember when they put on their tefillin that when you're wearing tefillin, you're not allowed to be masiach das from tefillin. Now we learned earlier in Hilchos Tefillin that doesn't mean that every minute that you're wearing tefillin, you have to be thinking, I'm wearing tefillin, I'm wearing tefillin, I'm wearing tefillin, I'm wearing tefillin. What it means is that you put on tefillin at the beginning of davening, and then you daven with kavana. You're not thinking about the tefillin, but the assumption is, and I'll find the lashon for you. We had this in the Mishnah Berurah earlier in the Hilchos Tefillin. I have to find it again. But we said that kol zman you're davening, the assumption is that the concentration on davening itself is already called not being Mesiach Das from the Tefillin. It's kind of like you're in that zone of Tefillah and Tefillin, but you can't be Mesiach Das. You can't forget about what's going on and be Isaac and Dvarim B'Telim or anything else. Let me just see quickly if I could find it very, very quickly over here. No, I have to find it. I'll find it for you. So a katan also has to be somebody who the whole time that he's wearing tefillin, he's not being Mesiach Das from the tefillin, and he's not joking around with his friends or schmoozing or going outside, etc., etc. He has to know that he can't be Mesiach Das from tefillin. Says the Mishnah is cutting Yud Beis v'chein Nagu. The Ramah says that indeed is the minig, that less than 13 years in a day we do not allow them to put on tefillin. But the Mishnah here in Ice Cutting Yud Beis says v'akshav Nagu. Nowadays the minig is la niach shnayim or shloisha chadashim kaidam azman. He brings down from the Magen Avram that nowadays the minig is to allow a child to start putting on tefillin 2 or 3 months before he becomes a bar chiyuva. I think the most prevalent minig nowadays is probably 30 days. V'ayin b'bir halacha, you take a look at the bir halacha. Cherish hamadaber ve'ein shemeya, a cherish, a deaf person who can speak but he cannot hear. Oy shemeya ve'ein medaber, or if he's a mute who can hear but he cannot speak. Chayiv lahaniach tefillin, he is chayiv to wear tefillin. Aval ein shemeya ve'ein medaber, but if he's a deaf mute, he's not mechuyev to put on tefillin. But ein moichid b'yadai milahanicham imroitze, but you do not protest, you don't object if he wants to put on tefillin and he goes to put on tefillin. Interestingly enough, if you take a look here in the Bir Halacha Dibra Maschil V'chein Noagu, which in my print is on the very bottom of the Bir Halacha Tzamachayim Beis, he says, Ayin b'Mishnah Berurah, take a look at the Mishnah Berurah, where we said that the minig is 2 or 3 months before. V'ayin b'Prima Gadim, he says, take a look at the Prima Gadim Shemet Tzadid, who takes the position, Livsaik Kemoisha Kasav Habach, the paskin like the Bach, the Alkol Panim Katan Ben Shteim Esrei Shana, Haloi made Talmud. If you have a 12-year-old who's learning Gemara, Umevin, and he understands what he's learning, Yachalan Yach Tefillin. Such a child could put on tefillin. The alav bevadai nucha lismoich im yodea lishmar es atzmai me'advaram an nizkar b'samach. Because a child who's 12 years old, but he's already learning Gemara, and he could understand the Gemara that he's learning, such a child, you could rely on him. If he says that he could be shomer the tefillin b'tahara, you could rely on him. It's interesting. The fact that he learns Gemara, and he understands the Gemara that he's learning, it sounds like he has a kesher to Torah. Once he has a kesher to Torah, you could already trust him and you could allow him to put on tefillin. Okay, Siman Lamed Ches. Din mihei machayavim b'tefillin v'hapeturim. The halachas regarding who is chayiv in tefillin and who is pater from tefillin. Uba yud gimel seifim, and here we have 13 seifim. Says the Mechaber Sif Aleph. Choyle meyayim pater mitfillin. Somebody who has a stomach ailment, somebody who's got a bad stomach virus or some other, gastrointestinal issues, is pater from wearing tefillin. Hagah, the Ramah says, afilu ein lo tsar, even if he's not suffering. In other words, we're going to see shortly in the Ramah that sometimes a person who's ill is pater from putting on tefillin due to his suffering. Over here, it has nothing to do with suffering. Over here, it's a problem of being a chayla meyayim, because you can't be mefiach. You can't pass gas. You certainly can't be in a situation where you might pass some excrement. Certainly, then you can't wear tefillin. That's not being shomer the tefillin b'tahara. So there's a separate issue of somebody who has gastrointestinal issues. He is pater from tefillin. Says the Mishnah Berurah chayla meyayim. Says the Chavetz Chaim. V'hu adin misha shasem mashke hamishalshel. Let's say somebody has to take a colonoscopy, and because of that, he has to do a Miralax treatment or one of these other a laxative treatment so that he can void his intestines. Such a person is constantly running to the Beis HaKisei, constantly being mafiach. Such a person really that's not the time to do it. You don't do it. Make sure that you put on tefillin for that day first. But if not, for whatever reason, if that's the way it happened, if it was unavoidable, he's potter from tefillin, because there's no way for him to put on the tefillin b'tahara. He's cutting bays. Potter, such a person is potter from tefillin. Why? Mishum de tefillin boy guf naki. Because one of the requirements for wearing tefillin is that you must have a guf naki. This person is not going to have a guf naki. Doesn't have a guf naki. He's an onus. It's not his fault. Onus rachmana patre. If due to an ailment he can't have a guf naki, he's potter from putting on tefillin. He's cutting gimel mitfillin. He's potter from tefillin. Very interesting Mishnah Berurah brings this down. If you take a look in the Sharatzion, this is brought down Berhativ Sivkat and Aleph. Mi shebitel mitzvahs tefillin machmas chayli. If somebody was in one of these situations where he was not able to put on tefillin because of an ailment, so he's being mevatel the mitzvah of tefillin because of illness, va'ovrol of shloishim yom shaloyanicham. Nebuch, let's say you have a person who was not able to put on tefillin for 30 days because of gastrointestinal issues. He wasn't able to put on tefillin even once, even for Kriya Shema, even for Shema Esrei, Nebuch. He wasn't able to put on tefillin for 30 days. See, Rabbi said, you have to be so thankful to the Ribbono Shel Olam. You take for granted that you get up in the morning and you come to shul and you put on tefillin. It's a schus, Rabbi said, to put on tefillin. Ki Shem Hashem nikra alecha. You get to put the Shem of HaKadosh Baruch Hu on your guf every day. That's a schus. So Nebuch, somebody didn't have the schus. Somebody has gastrointestinal issues, he has a serious illness, and he can't put on tefillin for 30 days. How thankful you have to be to the Ribbono Shel Olam when you make the bracha on tefillin, to thank the Ribbono Shel Olam for the schus pashut to be able to put on tefillin. So mi shebital mitzvahs tefillin machmas chayli. If somebody, unfortunately, he was an honest and he had to be mevatel the mitzvah of tefillin due to illness, va'ovru alav shloishim yom, and 30 days passed, shelo yinicham, that he didn't put on tefillin, kishachayzer umenicham, when he's able to put on tefillin again, ain't tzarich levarach shehechiyanu. This person, Pashut, wants to make a shehechiyanu. It's like, we're coming now to Rosh Hashanah, we're holding an El, we come to Rosh Hashanah, you're going to go blow shofar, you make a shehechiyanu on the mitzvah of shofar, right? We lived another year to be zoichet, to be becoming the mitzvah of shofar, we make a shehechiyanu. This person wasn't able to put on tefillin for 30 days. Does he make a shehechiyanu? Says the Mishnah in the name of the Berhativ, no. He doesn't make a shehechiyanu. Why not? Why Taka doesn't he make a shehechiyanu? The reason he doesn't make a shehechiyanu is because, unlike shofar, tefillin is not a mitzvah haba mizman lizman. The reason you make a shehechiyanu on the mitzvah of shofar is because that's a mitzvah that only comes every now and then. So when you reach the zman of that mitzvah, you're thanking the Ribbono Shel Olam, shehechiyanu v'kiyamanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh. I reached this zman, this special zman, that it's once again the zman of shofar, or it's once again the zman of lulav, it's once again the zman of sukkah. But over here, you didn't reach the zman of tefillin. The zman of tefillin is every day. You had a unique issue that unfortunately you weren't able to put on tefillin for 30 days. But you didn't now reach a zman of tefillin. Yesterday was also a zman of tefillin. So you don't make a shehechiyanu. This is an interesting raid about the first time a bacher puts on tefillin. The very first time he puts on tefillin. Maybe he should make a shehechiyanu because now he reached the zman of chiyuv. So there's raid about that. There are poskim who suggest that when a father buys tefillin for a child, he shouldn't give. Sorry, I just spilled some coffee over here in my Mishnah Berurah. That there are poskim that say that maybe the father should not give the tefillin to the bacher while he's still a cotton. He should wait to give it to him until he's a gadol. Then maybe he could make a shehechiyanu pashut on receiving the tefillin. So there's raid about it. Okay. Now let's go further in the Ramah. Says the Ramah, so we said that a chayla mayayim is potter from tefillin. The Ramah said this is true afilu ein lo tsar. Now we have an interesting halacha. Aval shar chayla, somebody who has a different sickness, nothing to do with gastrointestinal issues. Aval shar chayla, depends. Im mitzta'er b'chol if he's suffering from his illness, ve'ein daitoi miyushav alav, and because of his suffering, he's not calm, he's not at peace. Ein daitoi miyushav alav, he's not settled, he's very fachatet because of his illness. Says the Ramah Potter, then he's Potter from Tefillin. V'em lav chayiv, but if he's not suffering, he's chayiv. What's the Torah over here? Let's take a look here in the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah says, Ois Katan Daled, if he's bitzar. Oh, actually, this Ois Katan Daled goes back on before. I'm sorry. The Ramah said by the Chayla Meyayim, he's Potter afilu ein loy tzar. We missed that Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, he's Potter even without tzar. Afilu im hoylech bashvakim ubarachayvos Potter. You can have somebody who's suffering from gastrointestinal issues. It doesn't mean that he's bedridden. He might be able to get up. He might be able to go for a walk in the street. He doesn't need, we're not necessarily talking about somebody who's a chayla mayayim who can't go daled amos away from the Beis HaKisei because he has the runs and he's running to the Beis HaKisei every 5 minutes. It could be that he could go for a walk, but the gastrointestinal issues are such that he cannot protect himself from being mefiach. He's passing gas constantly, so he mamish can't put on tefillin. So such a person, says the Mishnah Berurah, even if he's hoylech bashvakim ubarachayvos, even if he's able to go out, maybe even conduct business, maybe he can go to the marketplace, Potter, he's still Potter from tefillin. And furthermore, says the Mishnah Berurah, he's not allowed to be machmir and say that he wants to put on tefillin. Ela b'shas kriyishma utfila im yodeya sheyucha lahamid es atzmai beguf naki. Certainly, if he knows that, for the several minutes it will take to say a quick kriyishma and a quick shmona esrei, if he knows he could do that with a guf naki, then he should certainly put on tefillin. Like the Mechaber himself is going to say very shortly in Sif Beis. So you have this chayla mayayim who's having a problem. He can't be shomer gufay. He can't be shomer the tefillin beguf naki. So he can't put on tefillin and he can't be machmir. But certainly, and he should pay attention to this. If he knows that he could grab 5, 6, 7 minutes and he could put on the tefillin and quickly say Kriya Shema and Daven Shema Esrei within that time span, and then he could guard himself against being mafiach, then certainly he should go ahead and he should put on tefillin. Now we move on to Mishnah Berurah's Katan Hay, where the Ramah said that there's a p'tur for a chayla who's mitztar. If he's mitztar and ein daitoi miyushav alav, if his mind is not settled because of his illness, then he has a p'tur for putting on tefillin. Potter. Says the Mishnah Berurah's Katan Hay, what is this p'tur? Why is he Potter? Says the Chavetz Chaim, Shema mitar chatzar yasiach daitoi mehem. Here again you see what I spoke about at the outset of this year. You see the incredible importance of not being mesiach das from tefillin. Says the Mechaber, if you have somebody who's ill, somebody who's suffering, somebody who's in pain because he's ill, it's very easy for him to be mesiach das. Somebody never who's ill, who's suffering, his mind, he's not feeling well. He's thinking about his pain. He's distracted because of the way he feels. That is mesiach das from tefillin. You're not allowed to be mesiach das from tefillin. So then you're potter for wearing tefillin. But, says the Mishnah Berurah, v'im roitza lahachmer al atzmai rashoy. But in this case, if you want to be machmer, you're allowed to be machmer. By the inability to keep your guf naki over there, you're not allowed to be machmer because you're not allowed to be mafiach when you're wearing tefillin. You don't have the right to go ahead and say I'm going to be machmer and put on tefillin even though I have stomach issues, and then go ahead and pass gas while you're wearing tefillin. That you have no right to do. But when it comes to hesach hadas, if you want to be machmer and you want to put on tefillin even though you're not feeling well and you're distracted by your illness, then you're allowed to be machmer. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Misha liboy aroim. If somebody is walking around without a shirt, his chest is bare. Dahainu shahilich b'michnasayim levad. He's wearing pants. Or lamaylahu aroim, but the top of his body is bare. Ve'ein b'chlal zeh machabeis hatzavar pasuach. We're not talking about somebody who top of his shirt is open. We're talking about somebody who's topless, somebody who's walking around with pants without a shirt, without an undershirt. Lo yaniach tefillin. He's not allowed to put on tefillin. Da'af de levarech rashoi, because even though in such a situation you're allowed to make a bracha, kevan she'ervasai mechusa, since the makom erva is covered, so in that case you're allowed to make a bracha. Kidemuchach b'siman ayin daled siman beis sif beis afilu hachi ein nachon sheyeh megula libo v'yidech tefillin. It's not proper to put on tefillin in such a situation. Says the Mishnah Berurah, you're not allowed to put on tefillin if you are in such a situation. Okay, now we move on to Sif Beis. So I just think there's a very interesting takeaway from Sif Aleph over here, is again, this concept of not being Mesiach Das from tefillin. You see how far it goes, right? That if somebody is ill and his mind is not settled, the Mechaber says he shouldn't wear tefillin because he might be Mesiach Das. Mishnah Berurah says you could be machmir, and certainly, at least for Kriya Shema and tefillin, you should go ahead and be machmir and put on the tefillin and concentrate on not being Mesiach Das from the tefillin. I had a Rebbe who whenever he was wearing tefillin, especially when it wasn't during davening, when he was wearing tefillin after davening, he was constantly, and we learned this earlier, and that's probably where it was. I was looking for the discussion about not being Mesiach Das from tefillin. That's probably where it is, where it says that you're chayiv to be mimashmesh b'tefillin. All right, I don't want to take up time. All right, I'll find it. It says that you're supposed to be memashmesh b'tefillin tamid. You're supposed to be constantly touching the tefillin. Why is that? The reason is so that you shouldn't be Mesiach Das. You shouldn't be Mesiach Das from the tefillin. Okay, I'll have to find it. Sif Beis. Mi shebari loy she'ena yochal hispalel b'loy hafacha. We have a little bit of a tangent over here. This is really a halacha in Hilchas Tefillah. Somebody, again, once we were mentioning somebody who's suffering from gastrointestinal issues that prevent him from putting on tefillin. Now we talk about such a person in the context of Shmoneh Esrei. Mi shebari loy she'ena yochal hispalel b'loy hafacha. If somebody is certain that he will not be able to daven Shmoneh Esrei without being mefiach, mutav sheyavar zman hatfila, it would be better that he should miss zman tefillah mima sheyispalel b'loy guf naki. Better to miss zman tefillah than to daven Shmoneh Esrei without a guf naki. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah is cut in Vav. First of all, says the Chavetz Chaim, realize that we're speaking here about Misha Bari Loy. We're talking about somebody who knows for a fact. This is like a psik reisha. He knows for a fact that he cannot daven Shmoneh Esrei without being mafiach. He knows that it's going to take him an absolute minimum of 3 minutes to say Shmoneh Esrei, and he has a bad stomach virus, and he knows there's no way he's making it through Shmoneh Esrei without being mefiach. But, says the Chavetz Chaim, this is la'afuke, this comes to exclude im eino yedea bebirur. Sometimes somebody's having stomach issues, but you ask him, do you think you could daven Shmoneh Esrei without being mefiach? Yeah, maybe. He doesn't know for sure that he can't. Then, bevadei ein levatel afilu tefillah b'tzibur mishum zeh. Then you shouldn't be mevatel even tefillah b'tzibur. If you don't know that it's a problem, you don't know that it's a problem. What's going to happen if in the middle of Shmoneh Esrei you feel the need to pass gas and it's unavoidable? So you'll stop, you'll pass gas, and then you'll wait for the bad odor to disperse, and then you'll go weiter. But that's okay, because you didn't know for sure that it was going to happen. The only time that we tell you don't daven is if you know for certain that it's going to happen. Now, why is there a problem over here? What is the incredibly serious problem of being mefiach in middle of Shemana Esrei, that if you know it's going to happen, you're not allowed to daven? Says the Mishnah Cut in Zion, lehispalel. This is a problem by tefillah. Dafka tefillah. This is only a problem by Shemana Esrei. Why? Mishum dehu ka'emed lifnei hamelech. Because when you daven Shemana Esrei, you're standing in front of Melech Malchei Amlochem HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You're speaking directly to the Rabbeinu Shalom. U'gnaihu lamod lehispalel. It is a gnai. It's very degrading to stand in front of Melech Malchei Amlochem lehispalel al das sheyifsak be'emtza ad sheyikla arech. Knowing for certain that in middle of your entreaties to the Rabbeinu Shalom, you're going to have to stop and stand there like a klutz and wait until the bad odor disperses. That's the way you go speak to Melech Malchei Amlochem Kutchabrichu. If it was unavoidable, it was unavoidable. But if you knew for sure that it was going to happen, how could you go in front of Melech Malchei Amlochem Kutchabrichu knowing full well that in middle of your speaking to the Rabbeinu Shalom, you're going to have to stop and stand there and wait until you could start over again, until you could start and go weiter. Aval Kriya Shema u'berachos sel mutter, but by Kriya Shema and the brachas of Kriya Shema, we don't have this halacha. Even though Kriya Shema is Kabbalah Sol Malchus Shamayim, but it's not Oimid Liftei HaMelech. You're not standing in front of Rabbeinu Shalom. So for Kriya Shema, you're allowed to recite Kriya Shema, even if you know that you're going to have to be mefiach in the middle. That you can do. So you stop, you wait for the odor to go away, and then you go weiter. Ach, b'li tefillin. But of course, this is without wearing tefillin, because you're not allowed to be mefiach in tefillin. So again, let's go back here to the Shulchan Aruch Sif Beis. He started by saying, "Misha bar lo she'eni yachal ispal b'lei afacha mutav she'avaz man tefillin mimachi ispal b'loi gufnaki." V'ayin lekamon Siman Pei Sif Aleph. He sends us over to Siman Pei, where he discusses this in greater detail. V'im ye'roa lo she'yuchal lahamid atzmai b'gufnaki b'shas Kriya Shema. Now, if this person who's suffering from a stomach ailment, if he sees in himself that he is able to guard himself against being mafiach for the time that it takes to say Kriya Shema, yoniach tefillin bein ahava l'Kriya Shema v'yavarech. So again, somebody suffering from a bad stomach virus. He can't put on tefillin. He can't put on tefillin because he's constantly being mafiach, so he can't put on tefillin. He's got to daven. So okay, so he'll go, he'll daven Berachas Kriya Shema, he'll daven Pesukei de Zimra, he'll daven Berachas Kriya Shema, he'll daven, why? Because all of these things you're allowed to daven, even if you're certain that you're going to have to be mefiach. If you have to be mefiach, you stop, you're mefiach, you wait for the odor to go away, and then you go weiter. Now, let's say he realizes in himself, you know what, it takes me approximately 2 minutes to say Kriya Shema. I see I could go 2 minutes without being mefiach. So then, put on tefillin when? Between the end of Ava Rabbah, you say Baruch Atah Hashem Aboich Abama Yisrael Ba'ava. Now put on your tefillin right before Kriya Shema. Say Kriya Shema with the tefillin on, and then right away take the tefillin off. That's what the Mechaber says over here. If you see that you are able to maintain a guf naki, if you are able to go without being mafiach for the amount of time that it's going to take to say Kriya Shema, so fine. Yaniach tefillin bein ava l'Kriya Shema. Put the tefillin on between the bracha of Ava Rabbah and Kriya Shema. So that means after Aboich Abama Yisrael Ba'ava, put on tefillin, and you'll wear your tefillin, and you'll say Kriya Shema, and then if you have to take them off, you'll take them off. V'yavarech. And when you do put on the tefillin between Ava Rabbah and Kriya Shema, you make a bracha, even though normally we're not mafsik in Berachas Kriya Shema, but to put on your tefillin and put on your tefillin with a bracha, you're allowed to be mafsik, so you're mafsik between the bracha of Ava Rabbah and Kriya Shema, and you make the brachas of putting on tefillin. Says the Mishnah Berurah. B'shas Kriya Shema, if you see that you can maintain a guf naki for the duration of Kriya Shema, ayin l'kamon Siman Pei b'Mishnah Berurah, kisham yivur ha'koil be'ezras Hashem. These halachas are all going to be discussed in greater detail in Siman Pei. Ice cut and test. When you put the tefillin on between Avarab and Kriya Shema v'yivarech, you make a bracha, v'yikra behen shema, and say Kriya Shema, v'achakach yichaltzein, and then take the tefillin off. V'im yoidea she'en yochal atzar atzmai meloafiach, ela b'chtei she'yuchal lachloi tzashal roish. Let's say the amount of time that you can maintain a guf naki is so little, you're suffering so badly in your stomach, so you say to yourself, you know what? I have just enough time to say Kriya Shema and to get the Shal Rosh off. But I'm not going to have time to say Kriya Shema and take off the Shal Rosh and the Shal Yad. Then the halacha is, go ahead and say Kriya Shema. V'im yedeh she'en yochal atzar atzmai meloafiach ela b'chtei she'yuchal lachloi tzashal rosh, afilu haki mutar laniach lechatchila es shneim. You can put on the Shal Yad and the Shal Rosh, and just make sure to get the Shal Rosh off before you mafiach. Kein kosav amagen Avram. Okay. Sif Gimel, 3 lines from the bottom here on Samach Chem and Beis. Noshim va'avadim peturim mitfillin. Women and avadim kenanim are exempt from the mitzvah of tefillin. Why? Mipnei shu mitzvah sasei shazman grama. Because the mitzvah of tefillin is a mitzvah sasei shazman grama. Women are potter in mitzvah sasei shazman grama, and avadim kenanim have the din of noshim. So the same way noshim are potter in mitzvah sasei shazman grama, avadim kenanim are potter in mitzvah sasei shazman grama. Haggah, says the Ramah, v'im hanoshim roitzin lahachmer al atzman. You have the women of the wall, Nebuch, and they want to be machmer, and they want to insist on putting on tefillin. Moichim biyadam, you protest and you object to them, and you protest. You don't tell them no, that they should not put on tefillin. It doesn't say throw rocks, it doesn't say anything else, but it says you should object. Moichim biyadam, you protest that they should not put on tefillin. Says the Mishnah Berurah cutting yud. Nashim. Women are potter in tefillin. V'tumtum v'androgynous. If you have a tumtum, that's somebody who the genitalia are covered up, so this person is a suffix. We don't know, is he a zachar or is she a female? We don't know. It's one or the other. The tumtum is either a male or a female, but we can't tell because the genitalia are covered over. So it's a suffix. Or an androgynous. The androgynous is the one who has genitalia somehow of both. So it's also suffix zachar, suffix nekeva, or a suffix Berurah b'fnei atzma. We don't know what this person is. Chayavin b'tefillin misafik kachal mitzvahs. These individuals are chayiv because tefillin is a mitzvah say daraisa, and by a daraisa you have to go l'chumra, suffix l'chumra. I've cut yod aleph. Nashim and avadim are potter because tefillin is a mitzvah say shazman grama. Why is tefillin a mitzvah say shazman grama? Da Shabbos v'Yom Tov lavzman tefillin, because you don't wear tefillin on Shabbos and on Yom Tov. Therefore, it's a mitzvah say shazman grama. It's a mitzvah that only applies during the week. Ice cotton yud beis. The Ramah said if the women want to be makbar on themselves, you protest. Ayin b'prima gadim shuhadin linyan avadim. That when it comes to avadim, you also protest. V'ayin b'sefer taisus Shabbos shekasem behedya lahepech. V'ayin b'sefer taisus Yerushalayim. Ice cotton yud gimel moichid b'yadam. You protest and you do not allow them. Well, I don't know if you do not allow them, but you object to women wearing tefillin. Why? Mipnei shetzrichin gufnaki, because tefillin requires a gufnaki. V'nashim ein zrizos lihizayer, and it is not in the makeup of women to be nizhar in such a thing that they should maintain a gufnaki while they're wearing tefillin. It's not something that I could readily explain, but this is what the Mishnah Berurah says. So says the Mishnah Berurah, and I don't think it matters if a woman will say, I am going to be nizar. No such thing. You're moicha on a woman who wants to be machmir and wants to wear tefillin. Okay? I'm going to stop over here. We'll continue next time here at Shem with Sif Daled. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. This is limud HaTorah should be megan against Klal Yisrael. The Baruch Shem should send Yeshua Sefur's Parnasset Shidduchim to all those in need, and we should be zeichet to see the BS Kal Tzedek. B'meher v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.